Right, Shalom. Before I begin, I'd like to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Ruach Kodesh. I'd like to say double honors to my teachers, the apostles, bishops, and elders of Great Millstone, the men whom I've learned the truth from. And I would also like to say Shalom and salutations to the elect that's out there preaching his word in truth and sincerity. I'm the brother Shaquat from the branch of Great Millstone, Montreal. I'm back once again with another in-transit lesson. And this lesson that I'm going to be going into is going to be touching, basically on the fact that, the Christian church, in the modern day Christian church, right, is being exposed for not, and has been exposed for not, pretty much bringing out the truth of the scriptures. A lot of men, a lot of so-called black men are leaving the Christian church, right, and is being filled up by predominantly women, right, because and there's a reason for that, because men are more logical than women. To put it simply, it's that simple. Men are more logical than women, and that's the truth, right? Women, they're fickle creatures, right? They're subject to change and basically reacting and acting based off their emotions, That's why the scriptures speak about a woman not usurping authority over a man, right? And this is in the scriptures, right? The scriptures also mention how that you shouldn't have a woman teaching a man scriptures, and that's in the New Testament, right? But once again, going to show you that the modern day Christian church is false. They basically neglect that part of the scriptures. They basically turn their eye or turn their back to it, because you have women preachers, women pastors that are out there, and that's not supposed to be. A woman is really supposed to be teaching other women. She's not supposed to be leading a whole congregation, right? A whole church. And there's a reason for that, right? Because they are the weaker creature, right? And the Lord did not create them to be logical thinkers, and that's the reality, man. And I'm not saying that to bash women, but that's the truth. That's the truth, and you can't deny the truth, right? And there's even the man that was made to be over the woman. A man was created to have a ruling kind of spirit, man, a masculine and authoritative spirit, right? Because that's what a man is, the strength of a house. If he has a family, a wife, children, he's the head and the strength of that house, man, right? And that's how the Lord, that's the natural order that the Heavenly Father created in the earth, man. But that's not being taught in the Christian church, and I wonder why. Well, the answer to that question is simple, man, because they're pushing woman worship, man. That's the society. The society is out of order, right? Like the scriptures say, this society is out of order, in a place of darkness, where there's no common sense, man. There's no understanding, because it's common sense for you to be like, okay, that's a man, But it's confusion. The confusion of the society will twist up your mind and pretty much try to make, something that's common sense corrupt. They corrupt good things, man. Right? You say a man is a woman and a woman is a man. That's confusion, man. This is the society we live in. And like I said, they uplift the woman, right? And basically what I wanted to really touch in this lesson It's the fact that the Christian church, there's no truth in the Christian church. And as of late, you had September the 23rd, the rapture that they're waiting for, right? But it never happened because we are in. Let me take a look. We're in September 25th, right? Right. So where's the rapture? Why has nothing happened? Right? Because they don't understand prophecy. The Christian church does not understand the scriptures because it wasn't given to them. The spirit of understanding, the Holy Spirit, was not really given to them, man. Just going to show you that the Lord is not dealing with these churches, these false churches, man. Right? But the Lord has men that are set up to bring forth the truth in these last days, whether you believe it or not. There's men that are set up to make sense of the scriptures, to bring the truth to light. And if you could see it, those men are actually the apostles and elders of great millstone. Right? Those are the men that are making sense of the scriptures, that can make sense of what's going on around the world, man. And no other doctrine, whether that may be a doctrine in the world, Islam, Buddhism, the conscious community, Kemet, even within the world of Israel, right? They can't make sense of what's going on and what's to come, right? Because that spirit of understanding was not given to them, man. But it was given to the apostles and elders of great millstone. That's why the apostles often say that they have the 100% truth, right? And that's not to say that they understand each and everything in life, like, right? They don't, like, for example, how fire, works, the details of how to make a fire, what components it takes. You don't need all that, man. But pertaining to the scriptures, they have the 100% truth. Anything pertaining to the scriptures and salvation, the apostles have 100% understanding on it, man, and they can make sense of it, right? And that's why they're worthy of double honors, because those are the men that the Lord, that we believe that the Lord has set up, to push the truth in these last days. It takes a spiritual man and a man that the Lord is dealing with to be able to see and acknowledge that, man. Because it's actually sealed to particular people to be able to discern, okay, these are the right teachers. This makes sense. This makes more sense than that. So simple discernment like that, having a mind to be able to decipher what's right and what's wrong, or what makes sense versus something that doesn't make sense. Certain people actually, they don't have that ability, man, because it's closed off to them. The Lord closed their mind because the Lord doesn't want them. The Lord wants them to be destroyed, right? Isaiah 6, right? It says, how long until the city be wasted without inhabitant, right? And the Lord said to shut the spiritual mind and eyes and ears of the people that He doesn't want to understand His truth. Matter of fact, you know what? I'm gonna get that precept. Give me a second. This is Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 6 and verse 9, it says, and He said, go and tell this people, hear ye indeed, but understand not, right? And this is really dealing with Israelites, right? And who are the Israelites? The Israelites are the so-called blacks, the Hispanics, and Native Americans, right? That's pretty much what the standard perception of what an Israelite would be, right? Because those are the people that fit the curses that the Lord put upon Israel in the book of Deuteronomy 28. But what you also have to understand is that there's also Israelites that are outside of the so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native American standard, right? Why? Because the Israelites were scattered That's another prophecy that was written about in the book of Deuteronomy. The fact that Israel will be scattered amongst the four nations, the four corners, man. The four corners, not nations. The four corners. So you would have Israelites amongst these different nations on the earth that look like these other nations, but guess what? Their lineage could be traced back to an Israelite father, man. But, you know, through the process of years, what happened is through sleeping with or through having a mating with different kinds of women throughout the generations, the child might lose his father's looks, you know, his father's physical traits, you know, to the point where he might, let's say your father sleeps with a white woman, right, and you're obviously going to come out light skinned, and then you decide to sleep with a white woman, and then your child is going to come out even lighter than you. And then let's say that child decides he wants to go and get himself a white woman, right? Guess what? That child eventually is going to lose all his melanin, and, you know, he's going to have blue eyes and blonde hair, man. You might have that. But guess what? It doesn't matter how you look on the outside, you know, because it's a spiritual thing. That's the child's spirit. Could be traced back to being an Israelite, man. His father being an Israelite, a dark-skinned man. And there's countless examples of that on TikTok. Right? People coming out, oh, you know, white girls. One that comes to mind, I remember a white girl on TikTok basically breaking down that, oh, yo, look, I look like this, my father looked like that. You know, she had blonde hair, blue eyes. She looked like a white girl. You know, your regular blondie. But when she showed a picture of her father was a dark-skinned man. I believe it was from the tribe of Judah, and there's a lot of cases like that, right? So Israel's scattered. You know, you can't take and look at somebody for face value. That's what these other camps do. You know, you have some camps that know that they're Israelites, but they stumble at the fact that you could have Israelites that look like white people, so-called white people, you know? But that's why, you know, we put an emphasis on giving double honors to the apostles and elders of great Muslim, because they brought clarity to that. You know, they brought clarity to the fact that, yo, the mystery of the Gentiles is that, yo, you actually have Israelites that could look like an Edomite. You know, and that makes sense, right? Because how would you explain Blake Griffin and his son, right? Look at Blake Griffin's talent, or somebody else. OKC, what's that guy? I forgot his name, but he's a center on OKC. He's a white guy. He looks like a so-called white guy, but guess what? His dad is a nigga, man. You know, and when you hear him talk, you know, he has that Jake attitude, man, that Negro attitude, right? Because I seen an interview and his voice is all deep like a Judite, because his father was a Judite. His father was dark-skinned, but his father ended up sleeping with a white woman, and he came out looking like a white guy, but he's not, you know. But the point being is that the spirit that's in him is an Israelite spirit. So you can't, you know, the mistake that these other camps make is making a quick decision, judging a book by its cover, literally, right? But you're not supposed to do that when you're in the truth and proclaim yourself to be a spiritual individual, right? You know? You can't just go off face value and emotion, because that's what they do. They get so upset that, oh, you know, they learn the history of what the so-called white man done, and I did that. Coming into the truth, I was like that. I'm not gonna lie. I was so upset with the fact that, you know, these Edomites are ruling the world, and they're still here, you know, and they're ruling over me, and the history, you know, you're upset when you first come into the truth, and you can't control your spirit being upset, man. So you just crash out, you know, fuck everything, every Edomite, man, fuck, but you can't do that, you know. You have to have the understanding of, okay, yo, there's actually Edomites that look like Edomites, but they're actually Israelites, right? And that's where you get the viral videos of these other camps. Most notable, you know, what I know of is Wi-Fi, Watchmen for Israel, because I was watching them at one point, you know, and I know about them, you know, but they have these viral videos of saying, yo, white man kisses my boots, all capital letters in the title of the video, and they gain traction. You know? But the thing they stumble at is, what if that white man that kissed your boot at that time was actually an Israelite? You know? So you're going to have to answer to the Lord for that. And you're going to have to answer to Yahweh Bashim Nashai, you know, for making another Israelite while you're... What if that guy was a part of the elect? You know, that's the... You know? You don't know. So us not knowing who is who's not a part of the elect, and who's an Israelite, which we, you know, who's an Israelite, we can kind of tell through the spirit, right? Through the spirit the person comes in, right? But we could be wrong too, you know. But that kind of us not being able to specifically know, but know to a little degree, you know, that's the Lord doing that, man, because the Lord wants us to understand or have a mindset of humility, you know, because that kind of keeps you humble. If you don't know, like, okay, I'm scared. If I do this, I might offend one of the Lord's elect, right? That shows the fear of the Lord too, you know, not getting on an individual because, how he looks on the outside, you know. Well, the scriptures say that the Lord doesn't judge according to the outward appearance, right? In the book of Samuel, because what happened, Samuel, when he was sent to, you know, Jesse, you know, which was the father of David, King David, when he was sent to that household, what happened was the Lord told Samuel to go there because he was going to anoint the next king, which was going to be David. But guess what? Jesse had more than one son, right? And when Jesse was asked to present his sons by Samuel, Samuel thought the first couple sons that were introduced to him, or the first one, you know, the first couple ones actually, were the ones that were the ones the Lord was gonna pick to be the next king, because of their outward appearance, because of their stature, how they look, how tall they were, how broad, you know, how muscular they were. But then, as he went on presenting his sons, you know, which kind of reminds me of the Cinderella story too. That's where they probably get the inspiration for that, right? You know, but as Jesse's sons were being presented, the first couple that looked or had the physical attributes of a king, the Lord denied them. The Lord said, no, none of these. But there's one son, you know, and then Samuel asked Jesse, you know, do you have any more children? And he's like, yeah, I have one more, and that's David, the youngest, and he's tending to the sheep. You know, and King David was a young guy, a young Judite. You know, he probably looked frail, not super muscular, right? But but then the Lord said, that's what I'm dealing with. I wanted to show you that because of King David's spirit, man. You know, the Lord was looking at King David's spirit, not his outward appearance, but his spirit was more appealing to the Lord than all his other brothers. You know, but Samuel was looking carnally, was looking at the physical. Right? That's why the Lord said, look not on their outward appearance. You know, for the Lord try looking at the spirit, the heart. You know? So yeah, we're supposed to be like that as well. See, not judging a book by its cover instantly and making a judgment, right? And that also goes into being a king, which Yahweh is the ultimate king, right? So let me finish off Isaiah 6:9 here. And he said, go and tell this people, hear ye indeed, but understand not, and see ye indeed, but perceive not. And make the heart of this people fat, and make their ears heavy, and shut their eyes, lest they see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and convert and be healed. Alright, so this particular Israelites that are sealed off from this knowledge, from even being able to make sense of it, you know, but that's a spiritual thing, because the Lord blocked their spiritual eyes and ears. You know, why? Verse 11, then said I, Lord, how long? And he answered, until the cities be wasted without inhabitant, and the houses without men, and the land be utterly desolate, until the destruction. You know, because those vessels the Lord saw and said, yo, they're not right. They're not going to be right. They can't be right. You know? So just reset them to simplify it. And they're going to be reset through the destruction that's going to come to America and other places around the world. Alright, so with that, I hope this lesson was edifying. I want to say, Call Halayimla, Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rucha, Dash. Once again, the honors to my teachers, the men whom I've learned this truth from. And I would like to say Shalom and salutations to the elect that's out there preaching this word and truth and sincerity. Until next time, Shalom.